Hello everyone, thanks so much for joining us for teleSur's English. I'm Cody Weddle. This is from the South. We start today in Peru. That's where the second round in presidential elections took place on Sunday, with roughly 90% of the ballots counted. Presidential candidate Pedro Pablo Kuczynski has a 1-point lead over Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of an imprisoned former dictator. Since the lead is so close, Kuczynski has stated he is going to wait for the official results before celebrating. Now we turn to our correspondent there in Lima, Raul Mora.
Although his followers were already celebrating victory, presidential candidate Pedro Pablo Kuczynski asked for patience. He also sent a message of unity, looking ahead to his possible government that would start in July of this year.
We are going to talk with everyone. We are going to have a government of consensus. No more conflicts and confrontations.
The coalition of social movements united under the banner No to Keiko were also celebrating. Their main goal was to prevent the return of Fujimorismo and what they believe would have been a narco state. Nevertheless, they claim they will be vigilant over Kuczynski's government.
We believe that the agreements that were signed during the campaign with the different organizations, they must be fulfilled. They're not dead words. The popular movements of democratic citizens that mobilized rose up with concrete demands and interest in change and transformation that Peru needs.
Meanwhile, candidate Keiko Fujimori appeared in a celebratory mood after the results came up, claiming the final results could change because the votes in rural communities and those of Peruvians living in other countries have not been counted yet. Raul Mora, teleSur, Peru.
Moving on now, 14 Mexican states, including the country's capital, held local elections on Sunday to choose new state congressional representatives and 12 governors. Many analysts argue that Sunday's final results will be a litmus test of the 2018 presidential elections. Now we turn to our correspondent Clayton Kahn there in Mexico.
At least in Mexico City, the dominant image of Sunday's voting stations was like this. Preliminary numbers point to 70% abstentionism in the capital of nearly 9 million residents. The numbers throughout the rest of the 13 states that had local elections were not much better, hovering around 50% participation.
Many people question voting because that political class will do what it pleases. Whoever they decide will be the ultimate winner. I believe that many people do not want to vote because there are so many pacts between parties.
The governor's seat in 12 of the 14 states participating in the elections were up for grabs. Many analysts say a major outcome of this election process is the significant loss of the dominant Revolutionary Institutional Party, or PRI. In at least 4 states, they have lost power for the first time in 80 years. Overall, the PRI won 5 of 12 gubernatorial races. Yet, for many voters, there is little difference between the major parties.
I annulled my vote because I believe that the party regime is a political system in descent. The political parties do not represent the interest of the citizenry.
And perhaps it was the overall apathy and lack of participation that kept election violence at bay. Election security operations were implemented throughout the country to curb any organized crime or political party intimidation and disturbances. On Sunday afternoon, Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto applauded the relative peace.
Today's election has been carried out normally and with calm. There have been some isolated incidents, but I do not have any reports of any major incident.
Yet in stark contrast to the positive and bright tone of Peña Nieto, the day finished out under dark skies and cries of indignation. There was violence at some polls, albeit less than in past votes. And for many here that have taken Mexico's streets in recent years against corruption, impunity, violence, and insecurity, Sunday's elections will produce little change to the status quo.
Meanwhile, Saint Lucians are at the polls today in national elections. The country's Labor Party hopes to hold on to the Prime Minister's seat against the more conservative United Workers' Party. The outcome of the elections could decide the fate of the country's participation in the Bolivarian Alliance for the Americas, which it joined in 2013. And in Venezuela now, opposition groups rallied today here in Caracas to push for a recall referendum against Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. For the latest, now we turn to our correspondent here in Venezuela, Ian Bruce.
Venezuela's opposition says it will keep up the pressure for a recall referendum against President Nicolas Maduro with marches and rallies across the country. But as you can see, this gathering is quite small. The national electoral authorities have said they'll meet with opposition representatives on Tuesday to explain the next steps. But the government insists the opposition has left it too late and included too many irregularities in its first list of signatures to make a referendum this year possible. All this coincides with attempts to launch a dialogue in the Dominican Republic brokered by former Spanish Prime Minister José Luis Zapatero. But the opposition insists there can be no dialogue without a recall referendum. The government, for its part, says it wants a dialogue, but it has to be open and without conditions. Ian Bruce, teleSur's back.
A lone gunman killed 5 Jordanian intelligence agents in a daylight terrorist attack on their office in a Palestinian refugee camp north of the capital. The refugee camp houses more than 70,000 refugees, making it the largest camp in Jordan. The country is a leading member of the U.S.-led coalition fighting the Islamic State group in neighboring Iraq and Syria. Iraqi civilians fleeing the city of Fallujah have been shot at by Islamic State group fighters who are holed up in the besieged city. The news was confirmed by the Norwegian Refugee Council, who received testimonies from civilians who were directly targeted by ISIS gunmen on Sunday. Political rivals in Britain have traded accusations of lies and betrayals ahead of a referendum on whether the UK should stay in the European Union. British Prime Minister David Cameron warned that the Leave campaign put economic prosperity at risk and accused the Leave campaign of putting a bomb under the economy, while that camp has accused Cameron of scaremongering.
There are many things
Ukrainian officials arrested a French man in May who was planning mass attacks during the Euro 2016 soccer tournament. Gregor Motois was arrested on the Ukrainian border with Poland and had a large catch of arms. According to Ukraine's intelligence chief, Motois had planned 15 attacks and was driven by ultra-nationalist views. At least 3 people have been killed and 9 injured in a train crash in the Belgian town near Liege. According to Belgium's rail infrastructure manager, a passenger train crashed into the back of a goods train at high speed. 40 people were traveling on the passenger train, where 9 of them were hurt. An investigation has been launched. Dozens of Palestinian journalists organized an action in solidarity with colleagues detained in Israeli jails. For more now, we turn to our correspondent, Noor Harrison.
The Palestinian Media Forum in the Gaza Strip staged Sunday morning an action in solidarity with the detained Palestinian journalists in Israeli jails. Dozens of journalists gathered in front of the office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Western Gaza City to protest the arrest of colleagues Samah Dweik from Jerusalem and Bassam Sayeh from Nablus and the occupied West Bank, who is suffering serious health problems. The protesters urged the international community and human rights organizations to push for the freedom of the detainees. Israeli forces arrested Dweik on the 10th of April during a raid on her home in the Ras Al Hamoud neighborhood on charges of incitement for Facebook postings. Journalist Sayyah was detained on October 8, 2015. Sayyah suffers from leukemia and bone cancer since 2011, in addition to severe pneumonia and weakness in the heart. As a result, there have been growing calls for Israel to release him to receive the kind of care he needs.
This is a message to our colleagues Samah Dweik, Bassam al-Sayeh and Omar Nazal. We tell them you are not alone. This is a stand of loyalty. They exposed the occupation and reported what is really going on in Palestine to the world. It is also a call to the international world to bear their responsibilities and act for the release of the detained journalists. We the journalists don't have an army, weapons or planes. We can only write. We only have the image and the word to form a pressure in public opinion for the release of our colleagues.
Palestine's International Forum for Information and Communication condemned the arrest of Palestinian journalists by Israeli forces. A statement released by the forum Thursday said that at least 20 Palestinian journalists are being held in Israeli prisons. The group concluded its statement by calling for the immediate release of all jailed journalists, urging human rights institutions to act against their arrest in the future and support them in reporting the truth to the public. Noharazin, teleSur's TV, Gaza.
At least 2 demonstrators were killed in police firing as opposition supporters in Kenya took part in protests. Demonstrators blocked key roads and set fire to tires in a day of rage aimed at overhauling the country's election commission. The opposition Court Alliance alleges that the electoral body is biased towards the president and has been staging weekly protests every Monday. At least 17 people, including 11 extremists, were killed during a series of attacks in oil-rich Kazakhstan on Sunday. Groups of gunmen attacked 2 arms shops to seize weapons and rammed a minibus through the doors of a National Guard base in the city of Aktobe. According to officials, the ex-Soviet nation has largely avoided violence by religious zealots. Paris Police Chief Michel Cadot says that the French Interior Ministry has devoted more resources to securing the Euro 2016. Now, this means Cadot has overcome his earlier anxieties about safety ahead of this soccer tournament. The police presence will be upped from 10,000 to about 13,000 to keep Parisians and visitors safe. And on a lighter note now, Malaysian entrepreneur has become a social media sensation after he began donning a Spider-Man suit earlier this year to pump up sales of his mother home's natural dish. So Wally Gansali sells nasi lemak, which is a traditional dish of rice cooked in coconut milk. Spider-Man sells between 300 to 800 meals a day and has started getting hired for children's birthday parties there in Malaysia. And that's what we're covering on this today. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll have plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For teleSur English, I'm Cody Weddle. We'll see you back here tomorrow.